What is going on, YouTube? Andrew Miller from hook'emheadlines.com coming back at y'all today with another spring camp preview for the Longhorns. Today we are looking at some potential position changes to be on alert for. The format of this video is going to be a little bit different than I usually do, but essentially I'll be looking at two position changes that are either like essentially already have taken place or are something that sounds like they are in the works. There's going to be two that um, are at least reported by one or two sources and that would certainly make sense, something to be on alert for with some sort of reporting or proof of those position changes coming into existence here in the next few weeks. And then lastly are two hypothetical position changes that I think do make sense and, just from a logistics perspective could be something to watch for. But the last two are more or less just my own thoughts on, some potential depth, some potential position changes just for depth reasons, or for, or just because it makes sense in terms of the way that certain position rooms are shaking out heading into spring ball. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump into the list. Again, I wanted to mention the ones that have already taken place or look to be in the works first. And then the first one up, we've talked about it on the site already, and as well as in previous YouTube videos for previewing spring ball. But the move for Savion Red to go from wide receiver to running back, I believe that was first reported here around a month ago, maybe a little bit less than. Red is a second-year wide receiver, a former three-star recruit that signed with Texas in the 2022 class. And he did get some run last fall at wide receiver, mostly coming out of the slot. He was largely viewed as kind of like a maybe not necessarily a Swiss Army knife, but a really versatile and elusive playmaker in the open field. Someone that could make some guys miss, that could fight through some wimpy tacklers, things like that. And he showed some flashes, especially in camp last year. Showed the potential to make an impact on special teams. I think that's still something to watch this year. But I think it makes more sense, honestly, to have him play at running back. I did an article on this on the site again a few weeks ago where I was talking about that I really thought it was a move that made a lot of sense, and a move that I give Sark and the Texas coaches some praise for, because I think on a multitude of levels, first being, just the depth that I think was needed in the running back room heading into the spring. This, this move really checks out. Heading into the spring, I think Texas had around 5 scholarship running backs on the roster. Mind you, 2 of those running backs, Jonathan Brooks and Jane Blue, are working back from injury issues. They both had procedure. I believe at least Brooks had a procedure on a hernia issue that he had a few months back. And so I don't know if both of those guys are going to be limited in spring ball, but it's certainly something to watch out for. And it was, a cause for Red to maybe get some cross training in that sort of workout format during the winter conditioning program. But from a skill set perspective, Red moving to running back does make a lot of sense. Texas likes to run some 2-back sets, and Red's a guy that was a good blocker last season. He was a good blocker when he showed that at camp, combine, and high school football settings, coming out of Grand Prairie. And he's someone that obviously has the experience as a receiver. So you have multiple ways that he can be a threat out of the backfield. Mind you, too, he played a lot of quarterback in high school, and he mainly used his legs as a threat. Had at least 1,000-yard rushing season. I believe it was 2. I would have to look back and confirm that. But, the point being that, Red is someone that is elusive, that has had experience carrying the ball out of the backfield. And he's someone that Sark can use in multiple ways as a threat out of the backfield, whether that's as a dump off in the flats or someone that he motions out, kind of like a Keelan Robinson, if you will, to actually motion out to the outside and be a threat running routes as a receiver. Again, also as someone that can block if you have another back lining up in the backfield. And so, like I said, from a multitude of layers, mainly being skill set and depth need, that I do like this move to switch Red from wide receiver to running back. The second of the two that I wanted to talk about among like the known or reported position changes heading into the spring is maybe more of something that I would classify as cross training, but it's something that I do think will take place during the spring to some degree, and that's Austin Jordan going from boundary corner to star. I think there's the possibility of him still training at boundary corner in the spring, but it does sound like the move is in the works for Jordan to get some reps at star behind Jaray Barron. It sounds like Jalen Gilbo is going to either be limited or miss spring ball entirely due to injury concerns. Gilbo has missed a lot of time. The last time he played a game for Texas was in Week 8 against Oklahoma State. Missed the rest of the season due to injury. And I mentioned this a few times in past videos, but there's speculation as to what Gilbo's dealing with. He suffered a lower body injury that ended his season last year, but it might still be that nagging. I believe it's a knee injury, or it could be something else that's ailing him, because it has been a few months since that initial injury was reported. But nonetheless, Texas needs depth help at star behind Barron. There's not really a clear guy in line behind Jalen Gilbo and Jaray Barron. Gilbo was kind of that guy that was supposed to start, maybe getting the torch passed to him from Barron, because Barron will this year will probably be his last on the 40. And so, I think it makes a lot of sense for Jordan, a guy that is pretty scheme versatile, that took reps at safety and corner coming out of high school, that can make an impact on the run stopping of the Texas defense, as well as filling some different roles in coverage schemes. He can play man and zone coverage. He showed that last year at Texas as a boundary corner, as well as during his time in high school. So again, I think the move for Jordan to cross train at star makes a lot of sense. He's someone that, while I do think he was in line to compete for the starting job once Ryan Watts was gone, compete for that starting job at boundary corner, I don't think that it was set in stone that he was kind of the next guy in line there. And so, Texas likes to have these guys that are pretty scheme versatile, that can play a multitude of different spots in the secondary. That's the way that Sark, Gideon, Joseph, and the staff recruit the defensive side of the ball, specifically defensive backs. And, I think from that perspective, it makes a lot of sense for Jordan to slide over to star, whether that be full-time or cross-training. I would imagine cross-training for now, but it does sound like the bulk of his reps in spring are going to come at star. So let's take a look now at some of the potential position changes that have been reported by a source or two, and that do make sense, could be in the works, that aren't just completely based on speculation. The first of which turns the attention to the offensive line. Here we're looking at one of the most experienced offensive linemen returning for the Longhorns in 2023, senior offensive tackle Christian Jones. It was big for Texas to get Jones back in 2023. I thought he was I personally thought he was headed for the NFL, but he'll be back for another year. But I've said this all along since he announced he was returning to Texas this year. I don't think it's set in stone that that he's going to be penciled in as the starter at right tackle. He did have a career year last year, and if he's the starter at right tackle, that means that he's earned it. Because I think Cam Williams, the second-year offensive tackle, towering like 6'7", 370, former blue chip recruit, I think that he is going to be able to push Jones, and I think that's largely what Kyle Flood and the Longhorns want in the spring. Jones ultimately projects at the next level as more of an interior offensive lineman. He doesn't have the biggest wingspan. He's not the best in pass pro. His strength has always been run blocking, and I think that would best serve him along the interior if he's, really looking to make his case as, a potential maybe late round pick for the NFL draft. So I think for both from the perspective of his NFL draft stock and his future at the next level, along with, the best fit and the best combination for the first team offensive line in the spring, that might involve Christian Jones moving over to the interior, especially because Cole Hudson and Connor Robertson are both expected to miss spring ball, two key returning interior offensive linemen. So, maybe you slide Christian Jones inside. You have another maneuverable piece in the middle in Hayden Connor, who was a starter at offensive guard last season. And And then, you also got DJ Campbell there in the mix as well that will, I think, push for a starting spot. All things considered, I would not be surprised in the slightest to see Christian Jones moving over to offensive guard in the spring, or at least getting some reps there. We saw Junior Angulau shift over to center last year, and I think that showed that Kyle Flood he just wants his best group of five in the mold that he wants. He wants his big humans up the middle that are able to move bodies off the line of scrimmage. Christian Jones provides that, especially from an interior run blocking perspective. I could see the move happening. Like I said, it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. The other one I wanted to mention here is actually, at least to me, the more surprising of the two that I've seen reported once or twice here in the last few weeks. And that's the potential of sophomore cornerback Terrance Brooks moving from the field to the boundary spot. Saw one from Inside Texas, I believe this weekend, and then also saw something, I don't think it was TFB, but I've seen this mentioned twice now where it's talking about like Gavin Holmes potentially pushing for the starting spot at field corner. And, I thought field corner was going to be one of the more interesting potential position battles to watch in the spring. I've mentioned that in past shows. And, given that Terrance Brooks was essentially the incumbent starter with him taking more starting reps in the last 3 or 4 games of the 2022 season, even over Deshaun Jameson when he was healthy. I thought Brooks would be the projected favorite coming back. Granted, not by that wide of a margin over guys like Gavin Holmes and Malik Muhammad. But if Gavin Holmes is the guy that the Texas coaches like at field corner, especially given how hard they pushed for him out of the portal and how much ability he showed, especially playing the deep ball and just being a really productive cornerback at Wake Forest in the last 2 seasons. I would see why, if they like him as the potential starter at field, that Terrance Brooks then shifts over more to maybe cross-train at boundary, with the bigger picture in mind that, you have the versatility of Brooks where he could play boundary field or even at nickel, because Brooks is one of the most versatile defensive backs of all these talented guys that you have in the secondary. And again, if you're planning on moving Austin Jordan I would say if you're planning to move Austin Jordan to star for the bulk of his reps in the spring, it does make sense then to cross-train Brooks more at boundary corner and get Gavin Holmes some of those first-team reps at field. I think all those, while that's a lot of moving pieces heading into spring ball without a doubt, it really takes advantage of all this versatility and depth that you have, especially at the cornerback position heading into the spring. So I like the idea there. My personal opinion is that, given past patterns from Sark and his staff, usually they give the incumbent starter some of the first team reps in the spring. So I figured that's what was going to be taking place here. But it looks like Holmes is getting some of the momentum right now at field corner. And so this is definitely going to be a position we're watching moving forward. And I've mentioned all throughout the offseason that Holmes, Muhammad, and Brooks are more than capable enough if they have big camps this offseason that they can win the starting job and be capable of taking starting reps. So definitely something interesting to watch there. Next, we are looking at 2 potential position change. I say potential. I think position changes that are more of things that I thought up. I did an article today on the site talking about position changes. Excuse me, that I think do make sense for the Longhorns. I mentioned the Jordan position change, but there's 2 others that I was kind of thinking up that made sense. The first of which involves second-year edge rusher Jaray Bledsoe, a former blue chip recruit, moving from edge to the defensive line, playing more of a true defensive tackle role. Now, before I get into some of the reasoning behind this, I mentioned this in my article, but I want to give the asterisk here that I do think that Bledsoe would be probably best fit as someone that plays more of a versatile edge rusher role, someone that can line up in the 3 tech, someone that can line up, just as a stand-up edge rusher, depending on what defensive package PK is running at the time, and really just how much true 2-4-5 defensive schemes that PK wants to run this season. there could be some maneuverability here with Jaray Bledsoe. At the moment, I believe that Bledsoe is projected to play at the jack position. Heading into the spring, he's probably going to challenge Ethan Burke for some of the backup reps on the two deep behind Baron Sorrell. Sorrell, the incumbent starter, a rising junior. But I think it actually makes a lot of sense if you want to move Bledsoe to the inside or more of the interior and have him play more of a true defensive tackle role. But I think that we really shouldn't be sleeping on his scheme versatility that he brings to the table. And really the fact that if he has a big spring, he's someone that could probably fill a more pronounced depth need. In terms of numbers, Texas is thinner along the defensive line than they are at edge rusher. Texas has brought in a lot of talented edge rushers in the last 2 cycles. And then if you look at defensive line, beyond the top 3 of Byron Murphy, Alfred Collins, and Tavondre Sweat, there's really not anyone proven in the mix. And you got guys like Vernon Broughton, Christopher Ross. I mean, you have Sadir Mitchell up the middle, but even he's a true freshman. And so, I think from a numbers perspective, sliding someone like Bledsoe over to the interior would make a little bit more sense, especially compared to some of the other candidates that could be up for this type of move if Texas wants to add numbers along the defensive line. Bledsoe stands at about 6'4", 275. And coming out of high school, he was someone that was looked at as a potential fit as like a true defensive end or an edge rusher. And even last year, he took like a half dozen live game reps, but I believe they were out of the 3 tech as a defensive, more of like a defensive end in terms of his alignment along the defensive front. And so, he's had the experience. He has the versatility to be able to slide inside. And he, in terms of his skill set and his frame, if he puts on 10 more pounds, let's say, that gets him up around 285, maybe 15 pounds at 290, that's putting him at 6'4", 285, 290. That's more than enough size given, he's got pretty violent hands. He's got a strong base. He's pretty fluid. He's got excellent change of direction, quick feet. He's improved as a tackler from what I've heard in the last 2 off seasons coming out of camp. He really, really made a big, I won't say made a huge splash. It wasn't like he was, blowing everyone away right away, but he definitely made an impression as an early enrollee last year that had a big impact on the staff. And, I think given a lot of his progressions in the last year or so and his skill set, he's someone that could push for some reps along the defensive line if he were moved over there. Again, would be able to move bodies, would bring some scheme versatility to the table. In terms of looking at more of like 3 true defensive linemen, 3 down linemen, looks up front for Texas, if they're running a higher volume of those and not so much the two true 2-4-5 defensive front, I like Bledsoe moving over to play more 3 tech. Looking forward or looking to the last kind of idea here I had as a potential position change, we're looking back at the secondary, and I think it is interesting to consider the idea of some movement between safety positions. The last one I mentioned here was B.J. Allen, potentially moving from boundary to field safety. This one isn't the biggest, this one isn't like the craziest or most radical idea ever. I get it. B.J. Allen was someone that had a lot of scheme versatility between the 2 safety positions coming into the Texas program last offseason. He's a 6'1", 205-pound second-year safety that was pretty much in every major recruiting service looked at as a top 100 or top 150 high school recruit in the nation in the 2022 class. And, one of his biggest positives coming out of high school was that he was so versatile. He's a good tackler. He separates pass catchers from the ball really well. His timing is excellent. He's pretty rangy, playing the center field as well. Some of the weaknesses for him, I think, mainly have to do with his ability in one-on-one pass coverage. I think more in intermediate routes or against quicker wide receivers, that he needed a little bit more improvement in terms of his technique. But, that's something that can ail you at boundary safety just as much as it does the field. Allen, if he's playing at boundary safety, one of the bigger pros coming out of high school was his ability to cover the deep ball. I mentioned his ranginess. If he's playing at boundary safety, you're not really utilizing that plus in his game to the best of its ability. And so, I do think from the perspective of his ability in pass coverage, along with his ranginess, I do like the fit at field safety. The main reason why I like the idea of him switching from boundary to field safety is really just the personnel that Texas has at each safety spot right now. I really think that if you're looking at some of the numbers between boundary and field safety, that while boundary safety doesn't have a whole lot of proven depth in terms of actually getting reps at the position behind Jalen Catalon, you got a guy like Michael Taff right now that did get a significant number of reps at defensive back last year, but it was mostly kind of in that nickel role. He did play some boundary safety, but again, not a ton of work under his belt. You kind of know what you're getting from Taff as well as more of like a high floor, low ceiling sort of guy. Again, just a steady and reliable backup. But I think coming in at boundary safety, you could have someone like Derek Williams that's ultimately taking a lot of the reps there. Meanwhile, at field safety, you got Jaron Thompson returning, but Keaton Crawford is kind of the projected backup here. And I mean, I think that Texas could be looking for someone else to push Crawford for reps. Crawford's been in this. He's been in this program for a while. He originally came in as a cornerback, and we've heard some some buzz upon position changes from him in the past. I believe it was last offseason that he moved to the safety position and was pushing for reps on the 2D. But no one that's really ever made a push for a starting job or that's shown a ton in terms of his production on the field. Consistently been one of the, I believe in each of the last 3 seasons, he was one of the 3 lowest graded Texas defensive backs in pass coverage among the rotational DBs. And so from that perspective, I could see someone like BJ Allen moving over to field safety and, pushing Jaron Thompson for some reps there. Or not Jaron Thompson, pushing Keaton Crawford for some reps there. Both Jaron Thompson and Keaton Crawford are seniors as well. And so, you don't have a whole lot of like young depth behind those 2 guys. There's, some multiplicity behind them there's some multiplicity with some of the other DBs on the depth chart, as I've mentioned already. But, Allen's probably one of the most natural fits and one of the most natural, or like probably one of the best candidates to move over to the field safety position. So, you get a younger presence there, someone that, can, give that spot a little bit more of a focus toward the future. And, would give him the opportunity to learn under Jaron Thompson, solidified one of the best field safeties in the Big 12. And so I think there's a lot of reasons why it makes sense to move BJ Allen to field safety. Now, I could see some people countering this, saying that, BJ Allen has already taken reps at field safety at times. He's never really been he's never really been at one defined position in the last 12 or 15 months at Texas. But most of the reps he took in practice in the last year or so were at boundary safety. And I believe it was all the actual game depth charts that were released by the Longhorns last season listed Allen as a backup boundary safety behind Anthony Cook. And so, like I said, I could see that move coming to fruition. It wouldn't be a huge change for Allen. He's still pretty young. I think still needs to make some strides before he's ready to become an every down safety in college. But someone that still has a bright future, someone that's very versatile, pretty physically gifted, and could bring a pretty valuable skill set to the table in terms of his pass coverage ability. So anyway, that is pretty much it. Got a half dozen position changes to kind of think over here and to watch heading into the spring. Some that are more likely than others, some that are just pitched by me, some that have actually been reported or I believe have already happened. So anyway, for Andrew Miller at hook'emheadlines.com, excited for spring ball to start tomorrow. But anyway, that is pretty much it. Welcome.